So yes, we're doing a bit on meditation in Sangha over the next 4 weeks. So we started last week. Um, this will run through the 4 weeks of July, 4 weeks in total. So we're on our second week. I've been calling this little course the Anatomy of Awareness. So I've been running this on Wednesday lunchtime, which is our weekly meditation class at the Buddhist Centre, which happens on Wednesday lunchtimes from 1 o'clock. Yes, and we've been following this theme in that class, and this is what we're doing now here, the Anatomy of Awareness. So I'm just going to start. Well, I'm going to give a little bit of a recap of what we did last week to start with, because I know with this class, different people come, so not everybody will have heard this. So I'll do a little bit of a recap, and then I'll introduce some more ideas, material, and then we're going to do another meditation based on the ideas that I'm going to introduce shortly. And then we'll have a break, and after the meditation, and then we'll come back with whatever time's left before the end of the class, either in one group. How many have we got tonight? Or maybe more likely we'll split into smaller groups. And I'll say a bit more about that when we come to it. So yeah, last week, we were looking at awareness and this idea that awareness might have some kind of structure to it. That's the phrase anatomy. You explore the anatomy of the human body. You look into what's actually within the human body, what makes it up, what constitutes it. Yeah, so we're looking at the idea of and hopefully the experience of awareness already being here. So we wake up in the morning and we are instantly aware. We're aware of sounds, sights, tastes, smells, the bodily sense. We're also aware of everything that's going on in the mind sense. And in Buddhism, the mind is also a sense. It's considered, in Buddhism, there are 6 senses, and the mind is the 6th sense. And the reason it's considered a sense is because what would define a sense is that it has an object and a subject. There's an objective and subjective pole to the experience of our senses. So we hear a sound, and there's an ear here to receive it, and there's also a consciousness that goes along with that, that's able to receive that and hear that. And the same is true with the mind sense. So the objects of the mind sense would be things like thoughts, memories, images. And, they can be quite subtle things as well, subtle kind of senses, like, I don't know, the feeling of nostalgia or something like that. And all these would be objects within the mind sense. And the subjective pole is the mind itself and the consciousness that goes along with that. So I hope that's clear. The mind can be seen just as another sense. And it's significant from the point of view of the way Buddhism comes at seeing experience. What do I mean by that? So there's a great tendency for us as human beings to live in our heads. I'm sure we're probably all aware of this. Because we're here, we're probably all aware of this. We live a lot of time in our heads. So our attention is following our thoughts, following various sort of patterns of thinking, you could stories that running through our mind, various kind of chains of thoughts that we tend to follow. And there's very much a tendency to identify with the thinking mind, very much to think that we, in fact, are that thinking mind. That's who we are. We're this thinking mind. I think, therefore I am, I think Descartes said. And in Buddhism, the mind is seen to be another sense. And so it's not considered that we are our thoughts. That thoughts are something that is arising much in the way that other parts of our sense experience arise. And essentially there's no difference in the process. It's just in terms of how we identify very strongly with the thinking mind, whereas we disidentify with something like, say, a sound that seems to come from outside. So yeah, that's a bit of an aside from the recap, but this is what we're going to be having a little bit of a look at today. So yeah, I was saying last week that awareness is here. We wake up with awareness or consciousness. Awareness is very easily obscured, so it can feel like a lot of the time, well, awareness isn't here. I don't feel very aware, or it seems like I have to work to be aware. But in a way, I would say that's not quite true. It's true in one sense, but actually what we're working on when we're working to be aware is we're working on, as it were, removing the obscurations to awareness that arise in the form of these mental hindrances that we get, mental, emotional, physical almost hindrances that we get. And when we first come to understand about awareness or appreciate awareness, perhaps when we first come to meditate, there's one of the first things that we see is that somebody says, well, follow the breathing, and we able to do it for a while, but then quite quickly, we shoot off into thoughts, and we go, oh, look, right, this is what happens. We try to be aware, and we shoot off into thinking. Yeah. And I was also suggesting that in a way, it doesn't require any effort to be aware. It requires effort to work with the hindrances to awareness, but it doesn't require effort actually to be aware. Awareness is just spontaneously here. And I likened it, to the sun, this analogy that the sun, when the sun rises in the morning, it is there, it shines on everything, and it shines on everything equally, and it lights everything up. And we're able to see everything, and it lights everything up indiscriminately. So, it lights up the birds, the trees, the landscape, people's faces, but it also, lights up the rubbish in the gutter and dog poo or whatever. It lights on it all equally. It makes no discrimination. We, with the mind, make a discrimination with our experience into what we like and don't like about things. But what I was suggesting was that awareness in itself doesn't do that. It simply sees, it simply experiences, whether that's through sight, sound, or any of the senses. And this is even true of thought. So there is a way, we become sufficiently aware where we can see thought simply just arising in our experience. And by saying thought, I'm including all those, the sort of the emotive side of our experience as well. Well, anything that can arise, is seen by awareness. And initially, in that first moment, it's simply just seen. There's just a bare awareness of what is arising. and then something comes in to make some kind of judgment about that experience, or to get caught up in that experience, or whatever. And this is the mind sense, we could call it that is doing that. Yeah. And we were, so last week we were looking at this experientially as well. So we were just we weren't meditating. We were sitting in a chair. I didn't want us to meditate because I wanted us just to be aware of awareness being here without thinking, oh, I've got to sit down and try and be aware. Just to notice that it's actually here. Okay, so is that enough for the recap? So yes, all right. This week, I thought we'd take a closer look at awareness and how awareness differs from the rest of our experience. Yeah. Before I say a bit about that, though, I'm going to say something about the idea of direct experience. So this is a phrase that I've been using for some time, been conscious of for some time. Direct experience, you could say, is seeing what's going on in one's experience, but not from the point of view of any kind of mental construction or any kind of mental overlay onto our experience. So usually when some experience happens, we immediately, like I just mentioned, goes into the filter of some kind of mental deciphering. So we're trying to frame that experience in a mental kind of way, in some way or other. I'm talking again mental in the kind of broad sense. In direct experience, we are just seeing what is there without any mental overlay or mental construction. So it's not an unfamiliar thing in practice. I mean, what we're talking about here is seeing from the point of view of awareness, or seeing from the point of view of mindfulness. When we're being mindful, we are looking at our experience directly without any mental overlay. And it's important because, in a way, appreciating this ability that we all have to see things directly opens up a whole lot of possibility in terms of looking at how our actual experience is. How our actual experience is beyond the mental constructions that we are constantly putting onto it. So this is, you could say, well, certainly in my view, a big part of what the Buddhist spiritual path is about. One of my favorite suttas, discourses that the Buddha gave, is called the Bahir Sutta, which many of you are probably familiar with. And in that sutta, someone called Bahir, who was obviously quite an accomplished spiritual practitioner in his own right, suddenly had this kind of vision to go and see the Buddha. And he asked the Buddha with a great urgency what it was that the Buddha taught. Somebody had told him that the Buddha was an awakened being, and he wanted to know what it was that the Buddha taught. And to start with, the Buddha says to him, I'm busy at the moment, because the Buddha was on his arms round. The monks in those days would get their food by going around with their begging bowl asking for food. And so the Buddha was doing this, and he didn't like people interrupting him whilst he was on his arms round. But Bahir kept on insisting, and it was a Buddha's tendency, it seems, his habit, that if somebody asked something 3 times, he would tell them the answer, whether or not they would like the answer. So sometimes, they would get an answer that they weren't expecting, and perhaps one that they didn't really like. But in Bahir's case, he asked 3 times, so the Buddha answered him. So the Buddha said to Bahir, in the seen, only the seen, or even in the seeing, only the seeing, in the hearing, only the hearing, in the sensing, only the sensing, and in the cognizing, so all mental functioning, only that. Yeah. So it's the Buddha being very, very direct about what is like the core of his teaching. So direct experience is what he was describing. In the seeing, only the seeing. In the hearing, only the hearing, etc. And then he said to Bahir, if you see things in this way, there won't be any you here, or you there, or you in between. So what he's describing is that the whole separation and splitting, which was another thing I was talking about last week, that the mind does over our experience, would then not be happening. There would simply be the experiencing of things without any splitting up into object and subject in our experience. And it is this splitting of our experience up into subject and object that causes us so much difficulty, so much suffering. And one way of talking about the goal of the Buddhist path is the non-separation of subject and object, the collapsing of this dualistic way of seeing things that the Buddha was saying is the core of our suffering. Anyway, yeah, that came out of the phrase direct experience. And this is available to us. So when we meditate, and for instance, if we're doing the mindfulness of breathing and we start to become absorbed in the breath, to some extent, the object and the subject are coming together. So the object being the breath and the subject being our awareness of the breath are starting to come together. And in the experience of this, there's a lot of satisfaction and energy that can be generated out of that experiencing, because temporarily, at least some of that separation has kind of collapsed in on itself. And the mind, capital M, I talked about this last week as well, mind with a small n, mind with a capital M. Mind with a capital M, or awareness, has collapsed into the object, and you've simply got the natural state being, which is the awakened state, the Buddha's state, the Buddha mind, whatever we want to call it, and the enlightened condition. So it's not necessarily, when we're doing the mindfulness of breathing, that's what happens, that we suddenly experience the Buddha mind, but it is going in that direction. Okay. So what I'm going to try and do today is highlight the aspect of our experience, which is the aware aspect of our experience, if you like, the aware whole of our experience. So most of the time we are caught up very much in the object. We're very focused on the external world, on the object, on doing, getting, etc. And we don't pay much attention to the pure subjective experience of awareness. And there's a special, I would argue, there's a special quality to awareness in and of itself that to some extent can be seen. And this is, this is part of looking at the anatomy of awareness. That awareness, unlike the aspects of our experience as described by the six senses, is something that stands to some extent aside from those six senses. So that's what we're going to have a little look at. So we're going to be asking things like, and it's going to sound a bit strange, but in direct experience, it's interesting to see. Can one of our senses be aware of another one of our senses? So can our seeing be aware of our hearing? Can our hearing be aware of our thinking, etc.? And we're going to be looking in this way to highlight that, well, hopefully we see that that's not the case, but it's something we have to explore in direct experience. That all of those things appear, as it were, in awareness, in a space of awareness, if you like, an aware space. Not a space perhaps in the literal sense, but space is quite a good way of talking about that. And all of these things can be seen or are seen to arise within that space of awareness. And then if that isn't enough, we might try and then see if we can see awareness itself in the same way that we're looking and seeing our other senses. So I hope that's not too mind-blowing for you. It is a bit jumping in at the deep end, well, maybe more than a bit, but hey, life is short, and well, I think, we just go with this in whatever way we can and get it whatever we can from it. We'll have a chance, afterwards, after the meditation, to unpack it in the discussion groups a bit as well. Okay, so I'm going to lead us through all of that, so don't worry, if you didn't get it when I was describing it there, that's fine. I'll be talking us through it. So let's set up for meditation. So unlike last week, well, unless an armchair is your chosen way to meditate at the moment, get into your usual meditation posture. So just completely let go of everything that I just said. Don't need to be thinking about it right at the moment. We're actually going to explore it in our own experience. whatever extent we can, and the extent that we can explore it is absolutely fine. It's just what's going to happen in this meditation. So aware of sitting here on whatever it is we're sitting on, cushions, chairs. Becoming aware of our posture. So the physical body and its contact with the ground. Try to feel that in a very direct way. This element of grounding through the posture helps us to ground our experience in the meditation. And it helps with the integration of our experience. So noticing the contact of our buttocks with whatever it is we're sitting on. And the other element within the posture that helps to support meditation is a sense of alertness, which is there from the uprightness of the body, the uprightness of the spine and head, chin tucked slightly in. So there's a sense of uplift through the upper body. These two elements of groundedness through the contact with the earth and the uplift, the alertness in the spine. Just taking stock of where we are at this moment. And we feel relaxed and happy just to be here. Or is there any sense of discomfort or disease within our experience? No judgment about anything. Whatever is here is simply what is here. What we can do is we can be aware of it. Allowing the body to be relaxed. Once the posture is established, just letting go of everything that can be let go of. So just using the minimum effort to maintain the posture. And everything else in the body is relaxed. So taking in a physical experience, unhooking from the thinking mind, being aware of ourselves and the sensate experience of our body. If you like, we can start with the head and face. Allowing awareness to unhook from the thinking mind and to soak into experience of the physical body as it is. Really a great sense of relief, just moving out of the thinking mind and coming into the body. allowing the attention, awareness to drop down through the body, taking in the neck and throat, the upper chest, the area around the bottom of the rib cage, the diaphragm. We're always with the physical sensate experience itself. Down into the lower abdomen, looking for the sensations. And from the lower abdomen, we can take in all of the body as a whole. But trying to take the body in as a whole by staying with the sensate awareness. And we're aware of the body without the need for any mental construction there. So it's possible to be aware of the body in this direct way without any thoughts having to be involved at all. If there is still a lot of thinking going on, see if you can just allow it to drop to the background of your experience and allow the sensate experience of the body to come to the foreground. So from here, having taken in the sensate experience as one of the senses, we're going to include the other senses as well. So there's probably not much going on in taste and smell, so we won't touch on those, but we'll start by just allowing sound to come into awareness. So that's sounds that are seemingly outside of the body, as well as sounds that are seemingly inside the body. So having taken in or included sound, can also include the visual sense. You can do this by opening your eyes, but sometimes that can be a bit distracting. There's very much a tendency for attention to be very pulled to the outside world with our eyes open. But even though we don't have our eyes open, there is still something going on within the visual field. So we have the colours on the eyelids, so some light still comes through the eyelids even with them closed, and tends to appear as kind of blotches and sort of patterns of light, quite amorphous. So we can take the visual sense in this way. Or if there's not much going on in that way, then I suggest you just slightly open your eyes. Not so much that the visual field is overwhelming, but just enough to let some light in. You may be able to notice at this point that the quality of awareness in the different sense fields, or is it the same? So don't think about this, but just notice. Now I'm hearing, now I'm seeing, now I'm sensing in the body. And then lastly, we're going to allow into awareness the mind sense. So don't make a deliberate effort to think, but one way into this is to just become aware of the physical space of the head. And we may be able to notice that into that physical space come words, come images, We'll also be able to see that all of these experiences seem to arise in a kind of space, sensations, sounds, visual images, and thoughts. All arising and passing within a space. Not talking about a literal space, which, like a room, which would only be a mental idea at the moment, but within a space of awareness. So we're going to look now and see what it is that sees our experience. So can we look to see with sound, focusing on sound again? What is it that knows sound? Is it the visual sense, for instance, that knows sound? Don't try to think about this, but looking in our direct experience. So it's not a question for the thinking mind. It's a question for a direct experience. If it's not the visual sense that knows sound, is it the sensate experience, the knowing of the body through sensation? Is it the sensations that know sound? What is it that knows sound, knows sound is happening? The experience of sound. Or could it be the thinking mind that knows sound? Can a thought or an image in the mind know sound? look to see. Or is it that sound and thinking are, as it were, distinct things that can't know each other? They're not the organ or the faculty of knowing. They are the thing that is known. But they're not the knowing. So as we've been aware of sound, sensation, sight and thought, can we become aware of whatever it is that knows these things? Okay, so let's just draw meditation to a close. Come back through the body sense, if you like. Just grounding again in the awareness of the body. And sensations. And then when we feel ready, just drawing the meditation to a close.